ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरोन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपां साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपदान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमः। ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी निति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे। नमो महावदान्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नाम्ने गौरत्विषे नमः। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। यस।
Hare Krishna, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 26. The King Puranjan goes to the forest to hunt. Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. So we are at text 10. Shashan Varahan Mahishan Gavayan Urushalyakan Medhyananscha Vividhan Vinignan Sharamamad Jagat. Translation.
In this way, King Puranjana killed many animals, including rabbits, boars, buffaloes, bison, black deer, porcupines, and other game animals. After killing and killing, the king became very tired. Purport. A person in the mood of ignorance commits many sinful activities. In the Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami explains that a man becomes sinful out of ignorance only. The resultant effect of sinful life is suffering. Those who are not in knowledge, who commit violations of the standard laws, are subject to be punished under criminal laws. Similarly, the laws of nature are very stringent. If a child touches fire without knowing the effect, he must be burned, even though he is only a child. If a child violates the law of nature, there is no compassion. Only through ignorance does a person violate the laws of nature, and when he comes to knowledge, he does not commit any more sinful acts. The king became tired after killing so many animals. When a man comes in contact with a saintly person, he becomes aware of the stringent laws of nature and thus becomes a religious person. Irreligious persons are like animals. But in this Krishna consciousness movement, such persons can come to a sense of understanding things as they are and abandon the four principles of prohibited activities, namely illicit sensual life, meat eating, gambling, and intoxication. This is the beginning of religious life. Those who are so called religious and indulge in these four principles of prohibited activities are pseudo religionists. Religious life and sinful life activity cannot parallel one another. If one is serious in accepting a religious life or the path of salvation, he must adhere to the four basic rules and regulations. However, a sinful man may be, if he receives knowledge from the proper spiritual master and repents his past activities in his sinful life and stops them, he immediately becomes eligible to return home back to Godhead. This is made possible just by following the rules and regulations given by the Shastra and following the bona fide spiritual master. At present, the whole world is on the verge of retiring from a blind materialistic civilization, which may be likened to hunting animals in the forest. People should take advantage of this Krishna consciousness movement and live their troublesome life of killing. It is said that the killers of animals should neither live nor die. If they live only to kill animals and enjoy women, life is not very prosperous. And as soon as a killer dies, he enters the cycle of birth and death in the lower species of life. That also is not desirable. The conclusion is that killers should retire from the killing business and take to this Krishna consciousness movement to make life perfect. A confused, frustrated man cannot get relief by committing suicide because suicide will simply lead him to take birth in the lower species of life or to remain as a ghost, unable to attain a gross material body. Therefore, the perfect course is to retire altogether from sinful activities and take up Krishna consciousness. In this way, one can become completely perfect and go back home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So in this way, Maharaj Puranjan, he killed many animals, and after killing and killing, he became very tired. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the person in the mode of ignorance commits many sinful activities. So ignorance is the root cause of performing sinful activities. And therefore, one has to come to the platform of knowledge. Somebody may say, oh, I don't know that this is sinful, but the laws of nature are so stringent that the reaction does not depend on our knowledge of the law. Right? Somebody may not know what is the law. No. Ignorance of the law does not absolve one from the responsibility of breaking the law. Correct. And Srila Prabhupada gives the example, graphic example, that even a child, very innocent child, if the child touches the fire, he will be burned. This is the stringent laws of material nature. The fire will not say, oh, only a child, has not gone to school, doesn't know. No. The actions and reactions of the material world are extremely stringent. And therefore, ignorance cannot be the excuse, and one has to come to the knowledge. And when one comes to the knowledge, then what happens is that, how to come to the knowledge? The second Srila Prabhupada explains, to come to the knowledge, one has to associate with saintly person and become a religious person. And one has to clearly know what are the pillars of the sinful activities. So meat eating, gambling, intoxication and vibichara, these are the four major pillars of the sinful activities. And one has to give this up completely and come on the path of religious life. People sometimes say that, no, Prabhuji, we are like, that whenever I do the religion, I'll do extremely religious. And whenever other life also continues. And Srila Prabhupada says, no, the sinful life and the religious life cannot go hand in hand, parallel to one another. One has to stop the sinful life, which is actually actually a troublesome life. Sinful life is a very troublesome life. And therefore, Prabhupada says, association with the saintly person and especially spiritual master and accepting instructions from the spiritual master, repenting for the past, one becomes eligible to go back home, back to Godhead. And currently, this is the situation of the world. People are tired of extremely, the materialistic life. Solution is not to try more materialism. Solution is not to get frustrated and commit suicide, because after suicide, one only becomes ghost. Suicide is not end of the problem. Suicide is just aggravation of the problem. Right? One has to come to the right association and just equip oneself with the knowledge so that he becomes eligible to go back home, back to Godhead. Text 11. ततक्षृत्रट्परिश्रान्तो निवृत्तो गृहमेवान् कृतस्नानोचिताहारः संविवेश गतं क्लमः. Translation.
Translation. After this, the king, very much fatigued, hungry and thirsty, returned to his royal palace. After returning, he took a bath and had an appropriate dinner. Then he took rest and thus became freed from all restlessness. Purport. A materialistic person works throughout the whole week very, very hard. He is always asking, where is money? Where is money? Then, at the end of the week, he wants to retire from these activities and go to some secluded place to rest. King Purajana returned to his home because he was very much fatigued from hunting animals in the forest. In this way, his conscience came to stop him from committing further sinful activities and make him return home. In Bhagavad Gita, materialistic persons are described as dushakritanaha, which indicates that those who are always engaged in sinful activities. When a person comes to his senses and understands how he is engaging in sinful activities, he returns to his conscience, which is herein figuratively described as a palace. Generally, a materialistic person is infected by the material mode of passion and ignorance. The results of passion and ignorance are lust and greed. In the life of a materialist, activity means working in lust and greed. However, when he comes to his senses, he wants to retire. According to Vedic civilization, such retirement is positively recommended, and this portion of life is called Vanaprastha. Retirement is absolutely necessary for a materialistic who wants to become free from the activities of sinful life. King Puranjana coming home, taking bath and having an appropriate dinner indicates that a materialistic person must retire from sinful activities and become purified by accepting a spiritual master and hearing from him about the values of life. If one would do this, he would feel completely refreshed, just as one feels after taking a bath. After receiving initiation from a bona fide spiritual master, one must abandon all kinds of sinful activities, namely illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, and meat eating. The word Uchit Ahara used in this verse is important. Uchit means appropriate. One must eat appropriately and not take after food as hogs take after stool. For a human being, there are eatables described in Bhagavad Gita 17.8 as Satvik Ahar, or food in the mode of goodness. One should not indulge in eating food in the modes of passion and ignorance. This is called Uchit Ahara, or appropriate eating. One who is always eating meat or drinking liquor, which is eating and drinking in passion and ignorance, must give these things up so that his real consciousness may be awakened. In this way, one may become peaceful and refreshed. If one is restless or fatigued, one cannot understand the signs of God. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.20, Evam prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogatah bhagavad tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. Unless one can become free from the influence of passion and ignorance, he cannot be pacified, and without being pacified, one cannot understand the signs of God. King Puranjana's returning home is indicative of man's returning to his original consciousness, known as Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is absolutely necessary for one who has committed a lot of sinful activities, especially killing animals or hunting in the forest. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So this is how the king was very fatigued, hungry, and thirsty. Thus he returned to the royal palace, first he took bath, appropriate dinner, and took rest, and thus he became free from all restlessness. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the materialistic person works throughout the whole week, always working extremely hard and searching for money. And as there is a weekend, he wants to retire from the activities, go to some weekend home or weekend house, and just recover oneself. So this activity, Prabhupada writes here, King Puranjan returning to his home because of being very fatigued from the hunting animals in the forest. And in this way, his conscience came to stop him from committing the further sinful activities, and he made him return to the home. So, and Srila Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita here that how the materialistic persons are called as Dushkritina. They are always engaged in activity. And invariably, Dushkritina activities are sinful activities. But when such a person comes to the senses and understands that sinful activities are leading to sinful reactions, there is a chance that he may retire from these sinful activities. Generally, the activities means, for the materialistic man, the activities means activities in passion and ignorance. Right. But one has to retire from these activities, and Prabhupada says retirement is absolutely necessary. It is not that till death one is simply working hard like a donkey. No, one has to retire at a point of time, and this stage is called as Vanaprastha, and one has to take the spiritual life more rigorously. Further, Srila Prabhupada explains that King Puranjan's coming home, taking bath, and having appropriate dinner and rest is compared to the materialistic person accepting spiritual master, hearing from him the values of life, abandoning the sinful activities, and thus coming to the senses. That is the indication. Another word here is uchitahara. Uchitahara means one has to eat very appropriately. Not that one just eats anything and everything, and especially, making one's stomach as a graveyard for so many animals. So this is not a right thing. Prabhupada says that eating meat, drinking liquor, one must give up these things. If one is restless or fatigued, restless is mode of passion, fatigued is mode of ignorance, there is no question of understanding science of God. And unless one becomes free from the influence of passion and ignorance, he cannot be pacified. But beautiful statement. Without being pacified, one cannot understand the science of God. Right. So one has to become pacified. Evam prasanna manaso. Bhagavad Bhakti Yogatah. Right. And for this, Prabhupada writes here, Krishna consciousness is absolute necessity. Text 12. Atmanam arhatan chakre dhupale strag gadadihi sadhvalal alankritat stravankro sarvango mahishamadade manah. Translation.
After this, King Puranjana decorated his body with suitable ornaments. He also smeared scented sandalwood pulp over his body and put on flower garlands. In this way, he became completely refreshed. After this, he began to search out his queen. Purport: when a man comes into good consciousness and accepts a saintly person as a spiritual master, he hears many Vedic instructions in the form of philosophy, stories, narrations about great devotees, and transactions between God and his devotees. In this way, a man becomes refreshed in mind, exactly like a person who smears scented sandalwood pulp all over his body and decorates himself with ornaments. These decorations may be compared to knowledge and religion and the self. Through such knowledge, one becomes detached from the materialistic way of life and engages himself in always hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and other Vedic literatures. The word Sadhva Alankrita, used in this verse indicates that one must be absorbed in knowledge gathered from the instructions of saintly persons. Just as King Puranjana began to search out his better half, the queen, one who is decorated with knowledge and instructions from saintly persons should try to search out his original consciousness, Krishna consciousness. One cannot return to Krishna consciousness unless he is favored by the instructions of a saintly person. Therefore, Srila Narottam Das Thakur sings, Sadhu Shastra Guru Vakya Chitte Te Kariya Aikya. If we want to become saintly persons, or if we want to return to our original Krishna consciousness, we must associate with Sadhu, a saintly person, Shastra, authoritative Vedic literature, and Guru, a bona fide spiritual master. This is the process.
Yes. After this, he decorated with his body with suitable ornaments, smeared tilaka, sandalwood pulp, put down a flower garland, and thus he was completely refreshed. And now Puranjan began to search out for his queen. Right. So the queen here is the intelligence, and the Puranjan is looking for the intelligence. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that when a man comes to good consciousness and accepts a saintly person as a spiritual master, he hears the Vedic instructions in the forms of philosophy, stories, and narrations about the great devotees and activities of the Supreme Lord. So this is how one has to make oneself sadhu alankrita. One has to alankrita oneself by the association of the sadhu, and in that association, one is absorbed in the knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and many other Vedic literatures. And Srila Prabhupada mentions the importance of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and how it is important to associate with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra and make one's time and life more spiritual by these wonderful stories from the Shastra. Text 13. Trukto hrashtras sadhustrapscha kandarpargakrishtamanasah न व्यचष्ट वरारोहान गृहिणीं गृहमेधिनीं. Translation.
After taking his dinner and having his thirst and hunger satisfied, King Puranjana felt some joy within his heart. Instead of being elevated to a higher consciousness, he became captivated by Cupid and was moved by a desire to find his wife, who kept him satisfied in his household life. Purport: this verse is very significant for those desiring to elevate themselves to a higher level of Krishna consciousness. When a person is initiated by a spiritual master, he changes his habits and does not eat undesirable eatables or engage in the eating of meat, drinking of liquor, illicit sex, or gambling. Satvik ahara, foodstuffs, in the mode of goodness are described in the Shastras as wheat, rice, vegetables, fruits, milk, sugar, and milk products. Simple food like rice, dal, chapatis, vegetables, milk, and sugar constitute a balanced diet. But sometimes it is found that an initiated person, in the name of prasada, eats very luxurious foodstuffs. Due to his past sinful life, he becomes attracted by Cupid and eats good food voraciously. It is clearly visible that when a neophyte in Krishna consciousness eats too much, he falls down. Instead of being elevated to pure Krishna consciousness, he becomes attracted by Cupid. The so-called brahmachari becomes agitated by women, and in the vanaprastha may again become captivated into having sensual with his wife, or he may begin to search out another wife. Due to some sentiment, he may give up on his wife and come into association of devotees and a spiritual master. But due to his past sinful life, he cannot stay. Instead of being elevated to Krishna consciousness, he falls down, being attracted by Cupid, and takes to another wife for sensual enjoyment. The fall of the neophyte devotee from the path of Krishna consciousness down to material life is described in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.17 by Narada Muni.
I'll go through. त्यक्त्वा स्वधर्मं चरणाम्बुजं हरेर् भजन् अपक्वो अथ पतेत् ततो यदि यत्र क्वा भद्रम् अभूदमुष्य किं को वार्थ आप्तो भजतां स्वधर्मतः.
This indicates that although a neophyte devotee may fall down from the path of Krishna consciousness due to his immaturity, his service to Krishna never goes in vain. However, a person who remains steadfast in his family duty or so-called social or family obligation, but does not take to Krishna consciousness, receives no profit. One who comes to Krishna consciousness must be very cautious and refrain from prohibited activities, as defined by Rupa Goswami in his Upadeshamrita. Atyahara prayasasya prajalpo niyamagraha janasangascha lolam cha sharbir bhakti vinashyati. A neophyte devotee should neither eat too much nor collect more money than necessary. Eating too much or collecting too much is called atyahara. For such atyahara, one must endeavor very much. This is called prayasa. Superficially, one may show himself to be very much faithful to the rules and regulations, but at the same time, not be fixed in regulative principles. This is called niyamagraha. By mixing with undesirable persons or janasanga, one becomes tainted with lust and greed and falls down from the path of devotional service. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. After taking his dinner and thus thirst and hunger satisfied, King Puranjana felt joy in the heart. And thus he was captivated by Cupid and moved by a desire to find wife, Gruhini Gruhamedhina. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that this verse is very significant for those desiring to elevate themselves to the higher level of Krishna consciousness. So we become initiated by spiritual master, we change our habits, does not eat the undesirable footsteps, and thus we come to Sattvaguna, Satvik Ahar. So Srila Prabhupada says that Satvik Ahar of simple rice, dal, sabji, chapati, milk, sugar, vegetables is a balanced diet. But sometimes, in the name of prasad, if one indulges in excessive overeating of luxurious foodstuff, like always eating rasgulla, gulab jamun, or it is like a continuous sugar intake in the name of prasad, then there is always a chance of one losing control over one's senses. Brahmachari may fall down. Prabhupada says Vanaprastha may again have a desire, or he may have a desire to marry another woman and thus again enter the Grahastha ashram. And thus, instead of being elevated to Krishna consciousness by being attracted by Cupid, one may glide down. Of course, such gliding down is also not condemned because one is in the devotional service. Srila Prabhupada quotes Srimad Bhagavatam. But there is that is not a compulsory. Prabhupada says that one has to understand these principles: atyahara prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha janasangascha laulyascha. These are the bhakti destroyer, shadbir bhaktir vinashyati, and therefore one should be very careful not to do any atyahar. Atyahar is eating too much or collecting too much of a money, and that leads to prayas, and automatically that leads to niyamagraha. So one should be careful and avoid the janasanga, especially the worldly association of the people, and protect one's devotional service. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Akash. Hare
Prabhupada.
Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.